As has been my practice the last 4 years, this is my 5th annual meeting address. I take this time to give my report on the parish, simply because typically when we have our 2 worship services, we hit more people with that message than we would at the annual meeting. Today it could be different, but I do want to continue with this tradition. Once again, this year it is my privilege as your rector to address the gathered membership of the congregation about the past year and comment on the state of the parish as I see it. But this year's address will be like none other I have ever experienced or given, and no doubt this will be a first for you, because most of you are listening or watching online through our live stream, either on YouTube or on Facebook. And after this meeting, after church today, we'll have our annual meeting through the Zoom platform for all members of Advent, and you received an email with that invitation to go. I recently looked over the previous annual meeting report from 2020. Advent Episcopal Church just started our plans for celebrating our 40th anniversary as a parish. We just had a spectacular visit from Bishop Jennifer Redall on December 1st of 2019, her first Episcopal visit at Advent since her 2019 election and consecration as the 6th Bishop of Arizona. Doesn't that seem like almost an eternity ago? Well, not an eternity, but certainly a lot longer than 1 year. We had so many events scheduled in 2020 to celebrate the 40th anniversary, through the last months of winter on into the months of spring and all the way up to Pentecost last year. But little did we know last January 26th what was in store for us in just 2 short months. After January and February, time seemed to stand still, and the year 2020 stretched out in length like no other year ever before. I want to tell you a story that few, if any of you, know about. Following last year's annual meeting, we had a brief January vestry meeting to elect a junior warden, appoint a treasurer, clerk, and welcome the newly elected vestry members from last year, Erica Hutchison, David Raymer, Gay Woolridge, and Earl Yingling. Then I went home and was off to the airport to attend the annual board meeting of the Episcopal Network for Stewardship. I had been recently elected to the board for a second tour of duty, 6 years after my first 2 3-year terms on the board. I was excited to return to the work of this vital organization on congregational stewardship with our newly called executive director, Davy Gerhard. Also, now that Jonathan was living independently at his new home, Beth was able to accompany me for the first time ever on a trip like this. We stayed with friends in suburban Houston, friends that we knew from our days in Dallas when Jonathan was born, and the wife of that couple was a colleague teacher with Beth at the Parish Day School in Dallas. So between my meetings with the board, the TENS board, we had a wonderful time reconnecting with these great people, and we still stay in touch with them to this day. On our last night in Houston, we took them to dinner to thank them for the hospitality. Now, the husband of this couple, Jeff, is a senior partner with some huge international law firm in Houston. There are several. And over dinner, he was telling us about this virus in Wuhan, China, that was going to spread around the world and would be a global issue in the coming year. Their in-house people at this law firm, who keep an eye on these things, kind of said this was quite serious. At that time, January 28, 2020, we all looked at him in disbelief. Really, he said. Even Jeff's wife seemed skeptical. Trust me, he said, it's going to affect us all. Okay, whatever you say, Jeff. Little did we know how right Jeff was going to be, unfortunately. 1 year later, we have all become familiar with the concept of global pandemic, and we are heartbroken for the loss of over 400,000 lives in our country alone to the novel coronavirus. Advent's 40th anniversary celebration plan suddenly became a distant memory as we faced the coming storm of the coronavirus. On March 12th, as news outlets were beginning to show the extent and spread of COVID-19 across the state of Arizona, we realized we had to make a decision. After learning about the risk factors and who was at greatest risk, I placed a 3-way call with Senior Warden John Long and our diocesan bishop, Jennifer Redall. Given that over 95% of our membership is above the age of 65, the bishop agreed with John's and my assessment that we suspend in-person worship for the immediate future and shift to worship done on live stream. And then 2 days later, Bishop Reddall suspended in-person worship for the entire Diocese of Arizona. It was then I assembled a team of parish leaders and others to act as a body of advice and counsel, and we called it the COVID-19 Response Task Force. It consisted of Senior Warden John Long, the Junior Warden Earl Yingling, Clerk of the Vestry Carol Tays, Treasurer Neil Haskell, 3 affiliated clergy, the Reverend Dr. Janet Gould, Deacons Debbie Greenleaf and Meg Lewis, and our parish nurse Pat Carroll. Since March of 2020, this group has met on Mondays over the Zoom platform, assessing and discerning the various risks of the coronavirus and advising on how we should go about conducting our worship, programs, and ministries as safely as possible. As time went on, we added Tech Team Ministry Coordinator Patrick Watts, Altar Guild Director and former Senior Warden Diane Diaz, and Lay Ministries Coordinator Nita Martin, also a former Senior Warden. I have such amazing counsel to work with at this church. It's just an absolute godsend. This team has proved invaluable to me and this parish, and if we were all together in person, I would ask you for a show of your appreciation by applause. So feel free to clap at home if you'd like. Without them, I could not have even begun to navigate the waters of 2020 since mid-March. Let's go back to the tech team. When it became clear to us that it was not safe to worship in person for a period of time, we realized we needed to live stream our worship somehow. As I was wondering out loud about how to do this is something I do a lot, wonder out loud, Patrick Watts heard me and said he could help with that. Now, Patrick has a fascinating life story, and I hope someday you get to hear some of it. But he's also a bit of a techno nerd. Nothing personal, Patrick, he's here this morning. And he saw this as something he could concretely do to help Advent, as he and his wife, the Reverend Janice Watts, our celebrant this morning, and she's now one of our affiliated priests. They had joined our church in 2019. And help he did and she did. We certainly had our share of fits and starts. We not only stepped onto a steep learning curve, but it seemed like we needed to sprint up that learning curve to keep people connected to the church through worship. And to his credit and the credit of those volunteers who joined him, they did just that. We also had a number of generous donors who contributed over time a total of almost $4,000 for improved technology and equipment. Together with Patrick and the new tech team ministry, they have created a vital link between Advent and its membership for worship on Sunday and Wednesday, and I commend their report to you in the Book of Annual Meeting Reports. What has been created now is a new vital link for Advent and its membership. The link will keep going on as well. We have discovered that offering services over the internet reaches people who no longer could come to Advent, some who have moved away, and some who have found us now having joined our parish membership, and we say welcome to them. This change in approach shifted our work in the office around. Office Administrator Kim Stevens had to redesign Sunday worship bulletins for online use, and we had morning prayer there for a while, then Eucharist, and then adding the prayer of spiritual communion. Not to mention, she had to reconfigure all the routines and systems in the office to help with those days when she works from home for her added safety. Unable to field a choir during the pandemic, music director Eldon Wald now began to play or provide music at all worship services, which has given Wednesday evenings a whole new feel to it, along with our use of evening prayer and the Litany of Healing. Very early in, still in March, I realized we needed to convey information to the parish regularly. Didn't have to be much, but it ought to contain maybe some scripture, prayers, maybe encouraging words of faith, in addition to the latest information on how we were going to function as a parish in this new world of a global pandemic. So I created a little daily email called Notes from Canon Timothy, which, with the huge help of Office Administrator Kim Stevens, we emailed each day to the entire parish, or at least to those who had email. Within a few months, after I seemed to have run out of things to say, I invited some of our lay leaders and affiliated clergy to contribute an article from time to time. We then renamed the daily missive Notes from Advent and now send it out Monday through Friday. It is still useful to communicate news on the virus front and parish news, especially about in-person worship. Some days, composing and publishing my article is almost like writing a sermon every day or every other day. Sometimes I share an article from one of the many interesting newsletters I receive in my email. I'm not the only person who has something interesting to say about life and faith. And many of you have expressed your thanks for the inspiration of this daily email. I have to tell you, I'll never complain again about having to write an article for a monthly newsletter, ever again. But I also have come to enjoy the writing process very much, and I think I'm slowly getting a little better with the written word. In September, we received permission and guidelines from the Diocesan COVID Task Force that it became possible to offer in-person worship again, but only while following some strict safety measures. For instance, we can only offer seating for in-person worship for the lesser of either 25% of our seating capacity, which in this nave is 422, or 50 people. So 50 people was clearly the maximum at that time. Everyone at worship needs to wear a mask, maintain social distance in your seating, temperatures will be taken, and no one with a fever admitted. And receiving communion would also have to follow some strict guidelines. And of course, most disappointingly, we couldn't offer food and fellowship after church, one of Advent's signature ways of welcoming newcomers into our community and a major way of strengthening our relationships with each other. Unfortunately, some people took worship and other health-related guidelines in an almost harsh way, like someone was being punished, or people were not to be trusted, or their rights or individual freedoms were being curtailed. Nothing could be further from the truth. The guidelines were created to keep people, our beloved members, safe, to protect you and others. The guidelines, you could say, are a tangible expression of the golden rule, to treat others as you wish to be treated, with dignity, respect for one's person and health, out of compassion and a sense of caring. As we reaffirm in the baptismal covenant, it is an expression of respecting the dignity of every human being. So, all our plans to celebrate the 40th anniversary during 2020 were shelved or put on hold or outright canceled. Annual events that we typically have, men's club dinners, the annual arts and crafts show, Lent, Holy Week, Easter Vigil, Easter Day, Christmas Eve, and Christmas Day, all of it postponed for the safety and health of our Advent community. And I have to tell you, those losses of community life and festival gathering are real and painful and not to be dismissed lightly. I haven't even touched on your personal stories of loss and pain caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, and I welcome them. It helps us to heal when we tell our stories of loss because others can empathize and express their love and concern for each other. Remarkably, however, ministry still happened at Advent. The hungry were fed through the efforts of our outreach ministry. I want especially to thank Sharon Navratil, Kathy Shires, Erica Hutcherson, Deacon Debbie, and several others who continued to make food bags to give out, to find people who needed assistance, and then found that help for those in need. The telecare ministry called our member households with their offer of prayer during their phone call of love, and we thank all our callers who are under the guidance of vestry member Melinda Case. They keep in touch with our folks during this time of necessary isolation. The vestry learned to meet over Zoom, and they also made phone calls to parishioners and wrote notes to our membership, all in an effort to keep people in touch with Advent. And I want to thank the vestry for their calm resolve through all of this and recognize those members who are rotating off after their terms end today, Neil Haskell and Flavia Nomikos. Our heartfelt thanks goes to Neil and Flavia for their many years of dedicated service to Advent on the vestry. Flavia was a former junior warden at one time. The third vestry member whose term ends today also happens to be eligible to stand for election for a full 3-year term, and that is Tommy Smock Jr. And we're happy to have Tommy back for that full term beginning this year. Our junior warden, Earl Yingling, has been invaluable in keeping our physical plant in excellent shape, along with our sexton, Randy Thompson, and including the entire exterior of the church being cleaned, patched, and painted. Advent looks like a beautiful glowing gem on sunny days if you haven't seen it lately. Our thanks also go to Marlene Burwald, who regularly mows the memorial garden, keeping it quite attractive, to Bill and Joyce Razan, and to Bob Stewart, who spend countless hours tending to all the landscaping needs of the church and meditation garden and back. The Finance Committee, under the leadership of Pat Fennell-Lewis, has also kept steady tabs on church income and expenses, and we're happy to report to you the members of Advent have been faithful in your financial support during the past year, even though we were unable to worship in the church for most of the year. I commend Treasurer Neil Haskell's report in the annual meeting book of reports. In fact, all of the reports are informative of just how much ministry did occur during 2020, even though so much of that usually happens during the year did not happen. One of the themes that runs through the reports is how much we miss worshiping together and being together. Well, speaking for your clergy, we miss it too, more than you can imagine. Worship is one of the heartbeats in the life of an ordained person. Not only do clergy lead worship, but they worship as well while they are leading worship, and that is not as easy as it looks. We too feel the pain in our hearts of not having you with us in person. This has been the hardest sacrifice of all for all. Even while we grieve the loss of our time together, we must be mindful of why it has happened, to protect you and all of us. The post-Thanksgiving COVID-19 infection rates in Arizona were among the highest in the nation, and at times the highest in the nation. And that elevated number of daily infections continued right through Christmas and on into the new year. Slowly, that trend is declining. We are especially keeping tabs on the infection rates in the Sun City West Surprise communities, as these rates seem to apply more directly to us. Today, I'm presenting an idea that could help us move past our isolation or our sense of it and return to a sense of community. In an effort to bring us back together as soon and as safely as possible, and in the spirit of trying something new, beginning at 11 a.m. on Sunday, February 7th, we are going to offer, for the short term, an outdoor worship service for anyone who wishes to come. We feel that morning temperatures are right now still too cold at 8 a.m. for outdoor worship, but at 11 a.m., temps should be more pleasant. Once again, beginning at 11 o'clock on Sunday morning, February 7th, we're going to offer, for the short term, an outdoor worship service for anyone who wishes to come. What I mean by that is we'll do it every week until things change, and let me talk about that. We still have to be smart about worshiping outdoors. Now, you can bring your own camp chair or lawn chair if you'd like, or grab a chair from the chair racks that'll be set out near the entrance to Payne Hall. Please set your chairs up at least 6 feet from others, unless you're from the same household. Please wear your face masks. We'll gather out front of the church in front of the great doors, so unless it's cloudy, it will be in full sun. Now, Advent does have a few tent-like canopies, and we can set those up to provide some shade for a few, but dress accordingly for full sunshine. Wear sunscreen, perhaps, or sun protective clothing. Now, we will still offer the 9 a.m. live stream worship for those who cannot get out of the house or choose not to go outside at this time. That's always going to be there. And if the infection rates continue to fall, as they appear to be doing, we will once again offer in-person worship at the 9 a.m. service. Then, once early morning temperatures are not so low, we'll start having the 8 a.m. service outside and return to the 10 o'clock service time inside. The key thing is, and I want you to hear this, we want to get you back into live in-person worship as soon as is safely possible. And at the same time, we do not want to increase anyone's risk of COVID-19 infection. It's a dilemma, we know. And yet it is easy to prioritize your personal safety. That we are committed to doing, while at the same time finding ways to increase opportunities for in-person worship and gathering. Additionally, as more and more of you get vaccinated for COVID, that also will reduce the risk of having worship services become spreader events. When the coronavirus outbreak first occurred last March, and we started down this road, none of us on the COVID-19 response task force expected us to be on the journey toward a one-year anniversary of fighting COVID. Yet here we are, only weeks away from such a milestone. It has been hard and exhausting, but the sense of community has remained challenged and stretched thin as it has been. Over 24 of our members have been affected. 3, perhaps 4 of our parish have died from COVID. These losses break our hearts. They remind us of the need for resilient community. Trusting in God to walk with us through this valley of the shadow of death, we know with faith and certainty that God will indeed carry us through. Of this, we can feel certain. Many of us have become quite adept at using video calling, be it FaceTime, Google Duo, Zoom, or some other video platform. Our EFM program, under the direction of Russ Brummagem, has been using Zoom for their classwork in a combination of Zoom and socially distanced in-person study. I plan to offer a Lenten book study over Zoom for all interested participants. I believe that while we can never exactly go back to the way things were prior to the COVID pandemic outbreak, we can create a new and better future for Advent and ourselves, applying the lessons we've learned during this time and adding the features that technology has provided for us to include others in new and life-giving ways. And so we press on, renewed in spirit and resolve to be a parish family in all the ways we can to make connections. We hold out our hand to our neighbor, even if it is only through a video call, a phone call, text message, or email. We will use whatever means we can to remind our fellow parishioner that he or she is not alone and that we are with you in these troubling times. We are here with you, and soon we'll see you in the not-too-distant future. We'll be able to hug you and sit down and eat with you once again, enjoying the gift of blessed friendship and Christ-centered community that we all have come to experience as our home at Advent Episcopal Church. I wish to conclude my report with the charge that I used at the end of last year's annual meeting, because in some weird way, I hope it will help us reset our vision and mission for the coming year. This year of 2021 will be a blend of old and new, of what was and what is to come into existence. Let these words occupy our hearts and minds as we step forward today in this new year for our beloved Advent Episcopal Church. This is our time, our opportunity to begin a new legacy for the next 40 years or even longer. It has fallen to us to carry this mantle, to take up this cross, to seek and serve God's will first and foremost, and not our own. Our neighbors in the Northwest Valley need a spiritual home like Advent that welcomes all, that admits our own weaknesses and shortcomings, but always strives to seek and do the will of God, knowing we can do nothing without God's help. It is our joy and delight to be asked to do this, because God has already given us the ability to do it and the resources to accomplish it all. All we must do is make the commitment and be generous in sharing our time, our gifts, and our treasure to advance the cause of Christ and to make his name known to all. For in the words of St. Teresa of Avila, Christ has no body now but yours, no hands, no feet on earth but yours. Yours are the eyes through which he looks compassion on this world. Yours are the feet with which he walks to do good. Yours are the hands with which he blesses all the world. Yours are the hands. Yours are the feet. Yours are the eyes. You are his body. For Christ has no body now but yours. Respectfully submitted, Timothy M. Dombek, Rector and Steward of Advent Episcopal Church, Sun City West, Arizona.